Okay folks, we are going to deal with the CSS for our project now, and to do that I'm going to jump back into VS Code. So straight in here in Visual Studio Code. And we should be coming back to exactly where we left it off, which is the index.html. If I come down and hit Go Live, it will open up in my default browser. Here it comes. And this is where we left it. Now, that doesn't look very much like, that's the one I was after. Doesn't look very much like the plan. Okay, but we're going to make it look exactly like that right now. Now, look, you can do this here in the Explorer inside VS Code, or you could go out and do it inside your htdocs folder. What we're going to create is a new folder. So we're going to hit the new folder icon at the top there. I'm going to hit it a second time because it obviously didn't hear me. And we're going to call it Styles, for want of a better name. Now that we have that, we're going to pause for a little minute, and we're going to jump across to OneNote. Because in OneNote I've put up what's called a reset CSS file. So let's deal with it first, and then I'll talk you through it real quick. So right click on the file, and we want to say Save As. Now you can see that I've already been browsing to my htdocs address book, and I want to put this inside the styles folder, so I'm going to double click that, and it's going to save reset.css. By the way, if you don't see .css, I'll show you how to fix that. So I've saved reset.css into my styles folder. I'm just in File Explorer here, and over here we've got the View menu. If you click on that and go Show File Name Extensions, that's going to be far more useful to you as you're creating CSS files and JS files and all that sort of thing. So turn on File Name Extensions in Explorer, and you won't look back. Okay, so we've saved that, so we don't need OneNote anymore. We can close it off. And if I open my styles folder now, in here you can see that reset.css. Now CSS resets are quite common. They have been for a number of years now, and they change over time. So as browsers develop the way that they do things, version after version, they change the way they actually represent everything. And that can be a bit of a challenge when what you want is to visually affect your pages. And so I'm not going to go through all of this. I'll just pick out some bits and pieces as we go along. But this is a way to get all of the browsers to represent your HTML, CSS in the same way, so that you can be confident your pages look the same on Safari, on Opera, on Firefox, on Edge if you have to. And so what I've done is I've created this. I'm planning on making this, instead of putting it in a styles folder inside my projects, make it sort of at the top level of my website, so that all of my websites that I create can talk back to it, and that way if I change this, they'll all get that change. But very quickly, box sizing is all about how a different browser represents boxes with padding and margins and things around it, and saying box sizing border box brings them all back into a standard. Anytime you see the star, it means everything. So here, everything is having its margins and padding turned off. And the font is going to inherit. That's important for things like inputs, because inputs generally don't inherit the font from the body. They use their own font, which looks terrible. So by putting that in there, the inputs are all going to inherit a nice font that we've actually decided on, which is this one. You can see I've also played around with color schemes, so you can do some quick switching between light and dark. I'm not going to deal with that in this tutorial, but if you want to have a play with color schemes, then you can go ahead and investigate that. Now this font family that I've decided on is the simplest font family that actually looks good. System UI, System User Interface fonts, they've usually been chosen by the people that make the operating system to be the best looking, in this case sans serif font possible. Now you can go into Google Fonts and find fonts that you like and import them and everything, but that all slows your website down. If you're using System UI, then what you're doing is you're using the fonts that are already available on this computer. And so that's why I like to use this. You'll see that it looks quite good a little later on. Minimum height is going to be 100% of the vertical height. So we're going to stretch our body out. And I've given it a bit of a margin there, 2.5 rem. So rem are root emphasis is what the EM stands for. I like to think of it as relative size. So 1 rem is the height of text on your website. So 2.5 is 2.5 times the height of a block of text, usually about 16 pixels. And then on the sides, 3 rem. We're actually going to override that when we style up our main section. And then for all of the H1, H2, H3, etc., we're going to have balanced text wrap. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate that, but basically it's a great way. If you've got a long title inside one of your heading tags, then it will wrap it so that it actually looks more balanced on the page. That's a handy one to have. Paragraphs and things like that aren't very readable if they get beyond about 65 characters. And so we've broken up our paragraphs into 65 characters. A lot of these things won't even be used in the current tutorial, but these are good things to start with. And then displaying images and videos and things as blocks with a maximum width of 100% is fairly standard too. So that's what we call the CSS reset. Now, I'm not going to link that into HTML. I'm actually going to bring that into my own style sheet in a different way. So we're going to go create a style sheet. So we're on reset, or we could be on the styles folder, doesn't matter which. Make a new file, and I'm going to call it main.css. And the very first thing I want to do is I actually want to link in that reset. And so I'm going to do that with an import statement. Now in CSS, it's at import. And then we give it a uniform resource locator, a URL. And in brackets there, we're simply going to go ./reset.css. So, whoops, CSS, there it is. So we're saying go to the same folder as I'm in and grab the reset.css. Now I'm going to demonstrate how this works before we actually start launching into our proper CSS. Oops, forgot the semicolon at the end, didn't I? So I'm going to save that, Control S. And at the moment, of course, index.html looks like that. So let's see what just that reset does for us. I'm going to go to index.html and I need to link in my main CSS. So I'm going to go link, and if I type styles, it will see that that's actually a folder. So I can press enter on that, and then you can see the files in that folder. I just want to link in the main.css. Now, before I save that, that's what we look like now. Save. That's what we look like afterwards. Now you can see that that body 2.5 and 3 rem gives us a bit of a margin around the outside, but our H1s have just gone back to standard text. You can see all the inputs have got the same font as the outside font. Alright, time to start styling. Like we did with the grid, we're going to create a root selector next. Well, let's put in some CSS variables, some comments just to tell us where we're at. And then we're going to put in our root selector. And inside here, we're going to define some variables. So the first one is going to be --dark, which I'm going to put in as hash. I've got to check my notes. 333. We're going to have a light of FFF. I'm going to make a buttons. So all buttons are going to have the color of, now what do we got here? I I think I've stolen this one from when I do work for the school, so it's probably the blue that I use. Although it does seem a little light. It's a nice blue. Panels are going to have a background color of F9, F9, F9. And then finally we're going to have a standard shadow, which is that 3D shadow straight from the tutorial we did on grid. We're going to go RGBA, and it is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0.35. So I'm just going to accept that and change that to a 0.35. Next we need to give it some blurring, so 0 pixels. I told you this Copilot did a fairly good job. And that's all we need. Alright, so now we're, as it says, we're in our global styles. You can put that in as a comment if you like. I'm going to make a body global style, and I don't want all of that. I just want the background color and the color. So I'm going to tab all that and get rid of the ones I don't want. Don't forget, you can always pause my video if you're typing this. So background color of light, color of dark. I didn't want font family because that's already being defined inside the reset.css. Now I like to do all my top level tags, so the next one would be my main section. If you remember, I just made that a standard main section. We want that to display as a grid, and I want to give it a gap of 2 rem. So that will be the gap between the form and the list. To get them side by side, we want to go grid template columns 1FR 1FR, and that's the selector we're going to override later when we go to a narrower screen. The other thing is I don't want this to spread all the way across the screen, so in my playing around I decided 1000 pixels was more than enough for width. And then finally we're going to give it a margin. Now when you give it 2 values like 3 rem and auto, the first value is the top and bottom margin, and the second value is the left and right margin. If you make them auto, that has the effect of centering the main section. Alright, next we want an H1. See, I told you this Copilot does a fairly good job. We're going to go for font size of 2 rem. And the other thing I want with my headings is a little bit of gap after them, so I'm going to set their bottom margins, just their bottom margin, to be 1 rem. 1 times the height of a font. Now look, that's enough so that we can see some difference now in our web page. So I'm just going to save that. I'm going to Alt-Tab across to my web page. And you can start seeing now that these headings are starting to look pretty good with the size difference. You can see the whole thing is inside. It's pushed over a little bit on the left-hand side here. So it's starting to look like 2 side-by-side panels. And we'll fix that soon. So here we are. We're not using these just yet, but a little later on we're going to need heading level 2, and I'm going to go for a font size of 1.2. Font size of 1.2 rem. Oops. And we'll also give it a margin at the bottom of, I've actually gone for 0.3. Thank you very much, Copilot. 0.3. Next, I'm going to style the inputs. Now, all of our inputs are text inputs, so this will just apply to text inputs. At the moment, if we have a look at this, you can see that the text is pretty close to the edges of each input. So I'm going to give it some padding. And the padding I chose was 0.5 rem. And just that in itself spreads it out quite nicely. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to give it a little border radius. I like these, but not much, just 3 pixels. And again, always like jumping across, and you can see that the corners are now just that little bit radiused. I think we've got a spare semicolon there. And the last thing I want to do is actually set the border. And I'm going to make it 1 pixel and solid and the dark color. If I save that and look at it, you can see that the border around the outside got a little bit finer. Alright, that button down the bottom, let's give it some style. So all buttons are going to be, I'm going to give it a slightly bigger font size. So I'll go for font size 1.3 rems. We'll go for the background color. Let's make it the buttons color. Background color bar buttons. The color will be the light color. It's doing all my work for me. We also want to give it a border radius. Actually, before we do that, let's turn off the borders. So border none. And then after that, a border radius of, I think I did 5 pixels. We'll make the cursor for the button the pointer, which is what you would expect a button to have as its cursor. So the mouse cursor, when you hover over it, will be a pointer. We'll give it a bit of padding, 0.8 and 3, so padding, top and bottom of 0.8 rem, left and right fairly big, 3 rem. I do want to put the box shadow on this to give it a 3D effect. And the last thing I'm doing is what it says there. No, it's not. I'm going to do that in a minute. Oh, the last thing I want to do is give it margins of 0 and auto, which has the effect of centering it. Don't worry about the transition. We're going to do that later. So if I save that now, that's quite a lot. But if we go back, our add friend button looks a whole lot better. Maybe a bit too rounded. Might drop that back to 3 as well. Border radius of 3. That looks a bit more consistent. All right. Now, I want to deal with what happens when I hover over that button. So I'm going to go button hover. And I'm actually going to, change the background color to dark. I don't have to change the color to light, it already is from up the top there. But this is where I'm going to put that transition. Sorry. So I'm going to go transition. And what I'm going to transition is the background color. Let's just try that. So, not sure if you picked that up. It's normally going to be that blue. We're going to change it to the grey, the dark grey, but it's going to take 0.3 seconds to do that change. So I'll show you what that looks like. Save it, jump over here. As I hover, it will fade into that grey to give you a visual cue that you're actually about to click that button. You can also see it's actually underneath my Mac cursor. So let me just try and get rid of my Mac cursor. That's better. You can see the pointer is the cursor. So when I go across the top of that button, I get that fading in and then it snaps back out. I could probably put that on the other one as well. All right, here we go. So, you know what I like to do? I like to also put in a transform. And every time I hover, I like to scale, but not by much. Just by 5% is enough. So that will make things just that little bit bigger when I hover. So you'll watch him expand a little bit as I hover over the top. 0.5 is only 5%. All right. Okay, buttons dealt with. Let us move on. Now, the form. This is going to be the biggest visual change. We're going to display this as a grid with a gap of 1 rem. Now, as soon as I do that, my form elements all jump into alignment like that. Now, suburb and postcode are a little odd, but that's okay, we'll fix that. Alright, so the form is basically done. Now, that suburb, we're going to display that as a grid. Now, if you remember, we gave an ID of suburb, so we can access that with a hash. And we're going to display as a grid. We're going to give it the same gap. And we are going to do a grid template columns, but this time we're going for 3 FR and 1 FR. So that has the effect of the suburb field being 3 times as big as the postcode field, which I think you'll agree looks pretty good. Okay, let's go down to, actually let's do this even though we're not using it just yet. Once the JavaScript is in place, this will make more sense. But we got that is it my friends? My friends. Remember the little div in the second box, in the second panel? It's my friends. We're going to display as a grid. And we're going to give it that. We don't need grid template columns. We're going to give it that. Now that won't do anything here because we don't have anything in that my friends div just yet. Where is it? Over here. So we've got nothing there to display just yet, but that will come up once we start putting friends in there with the JavaScript. Alright, after the IDs I like to do my classes, and the first one, the big one, is going to be the panel. And remember that the 2 panels are both classed as panel as well as their own individual one. So we're going to go for, let's do the box shadow first. And we'll use the var shadow. I've just realized that I think I might have typed something incorrectly back here. Oh no, box shadow, that's all good. So box shadow, var shadow. I'm also going to give that a border radius, but this one's going to be a bit bigger. Let's go for 8 pixels. We're going to give it a little padding around the inside of 1 rem, and the background color will be, as it says, panel. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to jump over and have a look, and now we have 2 panels that are just slightly darker. Nice rounded corners, nice shadows on the sides. It's starting to come together. All right, this next one is going to be the friend panel. So this is the actual panel we put in there every time we add a friend. So again, we're not going to be using this just yet, but we'll do the CSS now so we don't have to come back to it. Now, I did think of making the friend panels a class of panel as well, so they get all this, but there are a couple of small differences, and there's only really one thing that I wanted to keep the same, so I decided to do them different. So the display for the friend panel is going to be grid, so that when we put the names and addresses and things inside this friend panel, they'll appear one over the top of each other. We're going to give it a slightly smaller gap, 0.3 rem. We're going to give it a box shadow. We're going to give it a border radius, but it's not going to be 8, it'll be 3. And we'll give it padding of 1 rem. Thank you, Copilot. Now again, you're not going to be able to see a friend panel there because we don't have any friend panels yet. Once we add this stuff in after we've done the JavaScript, then our friend panels will start to appear one underneath each other. And that's it for the styling, but I do want to add one more thing, and that's what we call a media query. And this media query is going to be max width of 1000 pixels. Now you know that I made the whole main section 1000 pixels. Basically, as soon as we get down to the point where we're starting to squash that, we're going to drop them into the one panel over the top of the other panel format. And we do that simply by saying main is going to have a grid template column of 1FR. Don't need the margin, just that. So this grid template column will now override, where is it? Back up in main. Ooh, right at the top. Going to override this grid template column. So we're going from 2 columns, one side by side, to 1 column only. Now, see if I can demonstrate that for you. Over here, this is looking the same, but if I grab the edge, it'll let me. There we go. So as soon as I hit that 1000 pixels width, it goes to a 2 panel, top and bottom. And of course, if you're looking at on a phone, that's kind of what it's going to look like. So we now have our website styled. Next step is to actually make it work using JavaScript. Thanks.